Right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you to Focus on Liberia. Our discussion tonight is a continuation or a conclusion of our series on African unity and African collaboration. The question has been, how can African immigrants in the diaspora work together to impact our communities here in the United States and the diaspora, and also our respective countries back in Africa? To discuss this, I have my guest, Mr. Baker Kabanda. Baker, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Pleasure, Dennis. I'm greatly honored to be a part of this discussion, and thank you again for hosting me.
Thank you so much. And we're going to, the Uganda music was, I don't know, I didn't see you dancing.
Actually, that song in particular is a very interesting song. That young lady just recently got married, and she was married to a gentleman called Kenzo. Kenzo was, I think, the first African to win a BET award. Okay. But unfortunately, their relationship did not go so well. So it's been in the social media pages for the last week or so, because the young lady is getting married to another gentleman. So once you played the song, I wondered whether you're sending a special message to people in Uganda. Because there's been a lot of drama going on the social media platforms regarding those two. Yeah.
When I was preparing for this interview, I read a little bit about Uganda, and I thought that she would make an interesting news to play your music here.
Oh yeah, it just started with a lot of controversy right there.
Yeah, that's how they make news. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching us on Facebook, we'll say welcome to yet another series on our show. That's the African Immigrant Collaboration. Our guest today is from right here with us in Metro Atlanta. Originally, he's from Uganda, Mr. Baker Kabanda. And a little bit about him. He was born in Uganda, that's East Africa. Currently, he's living in Atlanta, Georgia. Prior to immigrating to the USA, he worked as an executive assistant within the Ministry of Internal Affairs in Uganda. Mr. Kabanda owned a digital marketing agency here in the USA. They help with small and mid-sized companies brand and advertise online. As you know, we live in a digital age, and certainly the internet is the fastest and cheapest way to reach people all over the world. Mr. Kabanda is a university graduate. He holds a bachelor's degree in public relations from Makerere University, and Makerere is one of the top universities on the continent. That university, as you may know, has produced a number of African presidents. Our guest is also an author of Building Your Influence, a book that shares nuggets on the mastering the language of human mind and breaks down the psychology behind what influences us to behave the way we do. It's available on Amazon, and later in the show, we'll see your copy so that you can search for it and get a copy. Mr. Kabanda is married and he has 2 siblings. His sister is a lawyer. Mr. Kabanda is also passionate about seeing Africa and Black people all over the world rise from the bottom of the pyramid, socially, politically, and economically, thus reclaiming our place as equals with people from all creeds and all walks of life. He also runs a school in Uganda. He started a school called Discovery Junior School. That's a school that he started in Uganda. Right now, his sister, who is the lawyer, is currently running that school. Mr. Kabanda, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you, Dennis. Once again, it's a pleasure to be on this platform, and thank you again for the good job you're doing for the people of Liberia, for the people of the continent of Africa, and the Black people in the diaspora.
Thank you so much. We are so glad to have you. You're a young man, and then I see that you've done a lot. You have a book published, and before we even go ahead, tell me, you started a school, you have a book published. Tell me what drives you to do all this at this young age?
Well, that's an interesting question. Essentially, a couple of years ago, about 5 years ago, my mom passed away. She was the greatest inspiration in my life. And when she passed away, I took some time out to think deeply about the whole concept of life. Why are we here on this planet? I mean, what are we here to do? Are we here just to, go to school, graduate, get a job, get married, make money, and then you die? And I came to a realization that there is more to our existence other than just coming here to accumulate wealth and maybe make kids. And in that period of self-discovery, I realized that I had a lot to do in terms of contribution towards society, particularly in my home country, in Africa at large, and the world in general. That's what brought me to the point of investing resources in starting a school to contribute towards community education within my home district, which is Kampala. The school is located in Rubaga district, and it's an initiative that we started with my sister and my young brother to help out with the education of kids ages 3 to 12. That's essentially kindergarten all the way through to grade 7, which we call primary 7. We realized there was a void in our community. And again, back to my mother, she was quite an inspiration. She was very passionate about education of kids. And when she passed, we started this school, partly to help the community and partly in her memory. And the school essentially deals with low-end earning people who work in the markets, especially the ladies. We've had a problem in Uganda, particularly. Very many ladies have lost their husbands to the scourge of HIV/AIDS. And of course, some men are just plain irresponsible. I mean, some of them, because of the poverty and everything, they tend to neglect their duties as parents. And the women end up left by themselves to raise the kids. And as you know, Africa is having a problem of unemployment, rampant unemployment all over the place. So these women are really scratching around to try to make ends meet. And certainly they can't afford the private education, which is pretty expensive. So this is a school trying to bridge that gap, provide quality education at a subsidized price. I mean, for $100, we educate a kid for a period of 3 months. Basically, that covers the fees for the teachers, water, electricity, meals, and the goal is really to provide basic education for the kids, because at the end of the day, if the kids can learn how to read and write, even if they don't go all the way to university, they have the fundamentals. In this day and age, if you can read and write, I mean, you can go sit in a library and discover the rest. You can sit on YouTube and these other online platforms and try to educate yourself, as long as you have the basics, the fundamentals. So that's where we come in and try to see that we contribute from that perspective.
That's brilliant. Nice job, and thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you for what you do. Here in the US, you do branding and marketing, and tell me a little bit. First of all, let me see that book. If you have a copy, and tell me just briefly what the book is about.
The book, this is what it looks like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Building your influence.
Yeah, and it's available on Amazon. It's just $19.95, give or take. It's just $20, and anybody can order it and receive it anywhere in the world, thanks to digital technology and people like Jeff Bezos and Amazon. We are highly grateful for them. The world is becoming a global village, and yes, that's pretty much it. The book, Building Your Influence, is essentially about human behavior, what influences us to behave the way we do, and how can we influence other people? How can we inspire other people to take action? Human behavior is essentially all about the mindset, really, what goes on in your mind. The book teaches how to be able to convince, how to be able to persuade other people to buy into you as a person, to buy into your product, your service, or your idea. If you're a parent, how do you convince your kids to go clean their room without making a fuss about it?
All right.
If you're a salesperson, how do you convince someone to buy your product? If you are single and you're looking for a wife, how do you convince her to say yes to you? So basically, it's a versatile book, and it's a book about human communication.
I can't wait to read it, and I'm gonna order my copy right after this broadcast. Well,
fantastic, yeah.
A lot of some of the, and that's the whole point of the show today is we've done this. We've spoken to people from Cameroon, from Nigeria, Liberia, of course, Sierra Leone. So today, someone from Uganda. So I just want to know a little bit about Uganda, and I'm going to start that. I'm going to go over some news stories from Uganda and want you to comment. One thing most of my people know about Uganda is the president, Yoweri Museveni, who has been there for a while now. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but let's go just to give us a glimpse about Uganda. Let's go briefly in some news story about Uganda, if that were okay. Here, can you see that story, that picture?
Yes, that looks like the Deputy Speaker of Parliament,
right.
Jacob Oulanya. Yes.
Jacob Oulanya has commended efforts made by the Lologi Health Center in reducing the number of maternal deaths in Omoro district to 0%.
Wow, that's commendable.
That's impressive.
That's commendable. Yeah, that's definitely commendable. Yeah. Because maternal health care is very important, and very many women across the continent often pass away during the process of giving birth. So certainly, if something has been done to that effect, that certainly is very commendable.
The next picture there is President Putin and President Museveni. There was an African-Russian summit that he attended, and I know that's your president. I don't know what Africans are going to get out of that, but what's the story?
There is a mad dash for Africa. There's a new scramble for Africa. This is an open secret. Of course, China, I think about a year ago, summoned African presidents to China, and they went rushing to iron out a couple of things and see how China can partake in the development of the continent. China, at the end of the summit, offered $60 billion towards the development of Africa. Of course, India has done a similar conference, an India-Africa summit. Certainly, Japan is throwing $30 billion towards the development of Africa. President Trump has recently passed the Build Act, and they have put up $60 billion for American companies that want to go and do business in developing countries, particularly Africa. And finally, Russia doesn't want to miss out on the party as well. So it also summoned the African presidents, and they promptly obliged. 40 of them showed up in Russia, and Russia has put $40 billion on the table for the African nations.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
There's a flood in Uganda. I think it's in the north part of Uganda. And you see, I think the primary kids are taking the exam now, so they have to relocate them. They were relocating about 212 primary leaving examination candidates in 12 primary school districts. The flood has been bad.
I mean, it's been raining heavily for the last couple of days, and it's so sad that in the 21st century, such occurrences are happening in Africa, and certainly it calls on us as Africans, both on the continent and the diaspora, to begin addressing these issues. I mean, the 21st century, having roads that still look like that is really a huge shame, especially on the leadership. Certainly, we cannot let that continue. We have a big responsibility, both the leadership in the continent and we in the diaspora, to partake in changing this narrative. As a matter of fact, if children are missing school because of these kinds of circumstances, it shows that we really need, we really have a big job to do, certainly. It's so sad, and it's a shame indeed.
Here, the picture you see, and this is very important just so that we can get a glimpse of Uganda. They were in, you see, those are inmates that are graduating. So the inmates are graduate people in jail, and they are getting education. So in Liberia upper prison has awarded certificates to 200 maximum security inmates in vocational education. I thought that was pretty good.
I mean that's definitely fantastic, because most of the times these people commit crimes. They end up engaged in petty theft because they don't have jobs, because they don't have skills. So if you put somebody in prison for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and you do not equip them with skills, the moment they come out, they are going to engage in the same criminal activities that got them in jail in the first instance. So it's really commendable if the government is doing that and equipping people with skills. Essentially, prison is supposed to be a rehabilitation center. These people are supposed to be taken from society and rehabilitated, and then ushered back into society as changed citizens. So certainly, if that is something that the government is doing, that's something that other governments can copy and pick a leaf, so that we can all partake in the development of the continent. That's certainly something that is fantastic.
Yes, that's good. And that's another picture of the flood taking place in the north. So there's still more signing. Just to conclude, this is a soccer history, a soccer story. There was this referee, so the Federation of Uganda Football Association, the referees standing committee, they have suspended central referee Emmanuel Kawiwa indefinitely for all football-related activities for allegedly soliciting for a bribe. In a recorded phone conversation, Kiwiwa is heard chatting with Uganda Mental University UMU coach Noah Mongira, allegedly requesting for some million Ugandan money to fix the semi-final return leg between the two schools.
I mean, again, that goes down to human behavior. That is one of the reasons I wrote this book. What influences people like himself to indulge in such an activity? Often we look at what has happened, but we need to dig a little deeper and figure out why such a thing happened. Because it's only when we figure out why such a thing happened, that's when we can figure out how to ensure that that doesn't happen again. So certainly that's a case of moral decadence on one part, but on the other side, it could very easily be a case of, very little pay, people are trying to figure out means of survival. Certainly it's not the best way, but it just reflects on the general situation. However, we should not look at it as a Ugandan thing. We should not look at it as an African thing. It's a general human weakness. We've seen these kinds of occurrences even at the international level, at the World Cup level. We've had situations where referees have been accused of fixing games. So it's a case of human nature, and it's a case of forces of good and evil living side by side. So I think that is just about it. It's not an African thing. It's not a Ugandan thing. It's just a human weakness. Moral decadence is taking up the globe at large, because very many things are happening. Corruption amongst the leaders. That is corruption at a mini level. So that's just about it. That's all I can say about it. Certainly, it's a shame. It's a shame, and they're spoiling the beautiful game of soccer.
Yeah, you are right. Now let's come to the Ugandan community here in Metro Atlanta, or also in the United States. How are you doing?
We're doing okay. The Ugandan community here in Atlanta, it's not that big of a community. It's a small community, and we are dispersed quite a bit. People live in different areas, Marietta, Lawrenceville, all the way up to Macon. We're a bit dispersed, but we meet every once in a while, and we touch base. We may organize a picnic so that people can meet, and we often organize end of year parties. So basically, yes, we do try to meet every once in a while. It's a fairly small community. Most of the Ugandans in the US live in Boston, Massachusetts. So the community here in Atlanta, Georgia is generally small. And overall, Ugandans per se tend to gravitate more towards the UK, the United Kingdom, which is our former colonial master.
Yeah.
So often most of them gravitate towards the UK. And well, of course, we all know immigration is a bit stringent when it comes to getting a visa to the US. So not very many people can easily get into the US.
So is there a national Ugandan community here in the USA?
What do you mean national Uganda community?
A community association or a group, an organization comprising
Yes.
all people from Uganda living in the United States?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do have an organization. It's called UNA, UNAA, and we do meet once a year on Labor Day weekend. So it's a meetup. It's a conference. We discuss things to do with the social, political, and economic setup back home in the country, and how we in the diaspora can contribute to our motherland and our country of origin. So yes, we do meet once a year on Labor Day weekend, and of course we do get people from Uganda. They come through both the politicians and people involved in business. The business community comes through, and we touch base and share ideas on how best we can develop the country and the continent at large.
What has been some of the success stories of these organizations?
Honestly speaking, I mean, I think there's a lot that needs to be done, especially by this organization of ours. I'm speaking to the Ugandan one in particular. It tends to end up as more of an opportunity for people from different parts of the US to meet up and, just have a party, have a good time.
Yeah, socialize.
Socialize. It's more of a social event than anything else. And yet it is a platform that certainly has the capacity to do a lot for the country and the continent at large. It should be a platform that can source for resources here in the US and channel them back to the country. Yeah. But it's sad that it turns out to be a party for the most part. I was blessed to attend a function over the weekend. I was invited to attend the Zambia independence celebration. It was actually held here in Atlanta, Georgia. A friend of mine organized the event, and the Zambians are trying to change the narrative. They're trying to change the narrative from just merrymaking and throwing a party to actually creating a platform that can drive change back home in Zambia and create impact. As a matter of fact, resources were collected towards the development of education. There's a lady who is engaged in vocational training back in Zambia, and resources were mobilized towards that effect, among other things. So I think the African platforms that put African people together in diaspora, we need to be more strategic when it comes to these associations, and we need to partake more in impacting our countries of origin and the continent at large. We shouldn't just meet up and socialize and gossip.
Right, and that issue is not unique to Uganda. Why you think it's so? I mean, we have so many brilliant people, very industrial, but when it comes to coming together to do something, It's like the emphasis has been on socializing. Why do you think is that?
I mean, I think for the most part, people who leave Africa and come to the US are tired of of Africa. They essentially have run away for greener pastures. And when they get here, they get complacent, they get comfortable. When they look back at the continent, most of what is happening on the continent is not really exciting. You'll find most of the leaders on the continent are dragging the countries down. There's lots of corruption going on in the various African countries, which is a bit discouraging for people in the diaspora. Every time they look back, they're discouraged, and most of them just give up and they choose to just settle and assimilate in America and associate with America. I mean, America is a big brand. People don't really want to associate with brands that are soiled and whose images are tainted. So when people get here, rather than strive to create change back on the continent, they would rather just assimilate and become American and go with the flow.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you are just joining us, this is Focus on Liberia. We are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. Our topic for discussion tonight is African unity and African collaboration. Our guest is originally from Uganda, living here in the metro area, Atlanta. His name, Mr. Biko Kabanda. Mr. Kabanda, what is Uganda's or the community here? What is their link to other African communities? Like you said, you visited the Zambian community, their Independence Day program. What has been the link between your community and other African communities here in the diaspora?
I mean, I'm going to be very honest. There is not really much of a link. And this is something that I've noticed amongst most of the communities, of the African communities here. Most of them tend to stay by themselves. The Nigerians will do their own thing in the little corner over there. The Ugandans will do their thing in the little corner over there. The Kenyans will do their thing in the little corner over there. There's a lack of synergy on the most part for the different African communities. And that does not just stop at just the African communities. It crosses all the way into the African American communities as well. Basically, the Africans are on one corner and the African Americans are on another corner. They don't intermingle as much. And there's a bit of bad blood brewing between the two. Apparently, I've interacted with the African Americans and they claim that the Africans look at them as lazy. They're quite condescending and patronizing towards them. And certainly, we need to forge bridges. Essentially, we need to forge bridges between the African communities here. Essentially, those who came willingly and those who were brought over back in the days as slaves. So certainly, we are very, very disunited.
Yeah, yeah, and we're going to talk about the rift, that gap between the African immigrant community or the African who came willingly and the community of the Africans who were forced to come here as a result of slaves or their descendants. We're going to delve more into that because I see videos on YouTube about that feeling that you have just expressed. But that's the crux of our discussion tonight is, so what do we do? We see that the Kenyans are doing their own, the Liberians are doing theirs, the Nigerians are doing theirs. But when we come together as a big community, there will be a little more impact. So how do we get there?
I mean, we have to take baby steps. Certainly, you've already taken a giant step because right now Uganda is in talks with Liberia in this very minute, and it's platforms such as this. It's able and visionary leadership from people such as yourself that are going to change this narrative. One thing we need to realize is that African nations by themselves are very small, and the populations are very small. The GDPs are so meager. A statistic just shocked me. Do you know that California, the GDP of California alone is $3 trillion, and the GDP of the entire Africa, if all the African countries were to unite, their GDP would come to about $2.5 trillion. So California alone has a higher GDP than entire Africa combined. Countries like India, like France, like Japan, like China, like US, all of them have GDPs that are higher than the entire Africa combined. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this to show that we need to come together. If we don't come together, there's absolutely no way we are going to be able to leave the bottom of the pyramid by ourselves. Look at Liberia. Liberia has about 4.7 million people. The GDP of Liberia is roughly $3 billion US. That's a very small economy. So imagine a country like Liberia trying to enter a negotiation with a country like, say, the US. The US is a 20 trillion, that's trillion with a T. It's a $20 trillion economy. It's the equivalent of putting somebody in featherweight with Mike Tyson in the same ring. He's gonna obliterate you. So certainly Africa, we need to wake up. We need to wake up. It doesn't benefit us. United we stand, divided we fall. There are very many differences between the African countries. Without a shade of doubt, language is something that separates us. There's difference in terms of religion. There's difference in terms of tribes and all these other kinds of things. But we need to look beyond that and form some type of synergy, because if we don't, we are going to stay at the bottom of the pyramid, and not just at the bottom of the pyramid, we are going to be wiped out, because right now the Chinese are coming onto the continent in a very big way. They are coming onto the continent, they are negotiating with individual African countries, and because the countries don't have the capacity to negotiate on the round table for, at the same level. This is a big country. They're definitely being bulldozed, and they're losing out on all negotiations. They're coming to the table as beggars, because if you look at a country like, say, Uganda, the GDP is give or take 27 billion US dollars. With 27 billion US dollars, you cannot negotiate with China, which is at 13 trillion US dollars. They're going to run circles around you, and they're going to be able to take whatever they can from you. Yeah. But if Africa can unite and we come to the table and negotiate as Africa, as a unified bloc, we definitely can be able to get some better deals from these other visitors of ours who are attempting to do business and help out. We need to realize one thing for sure, is that much as all these countries are coming in to help, they too have their own problems. Exactly. China as a country has 1.4 billion people. Now, the size of China is pretty much the size of the US. And Africa, just to put it in perspective, Africa is 11.7 million square miles. So you can fit the whole of the US, you can fit China, you can fit India, the whole of Eastern Europe, UK, France, and Spain into Africa, and you still have some space left over. So that is the size of Africa. So when China shows up here, I mean, China is looking for resources for its industries. Exactly. China is looking for land, because they don't have any more land, and Africa has tons of land. 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land is in Africa. So the Chinese are looking for land to settle their people. They're looking for land for agriculture.
You are killing me with these statistics. let's go to the GDP. And
yes,
let me show a picture of Africans negotiating, right?
Yes.
So Africans are at a table, right? So because it's so disproportionate, so we go to these conferences, as you said, as beggars.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
See Africa in Russia.
Yep.
So when you go to negotiate with someone, a trade deal as we call it, so definitely what we are doing is we are asking for help. And can these people help us with their own problems without getting anything in return. Who does that?
I mean, you cannot expect me to feed my neighbor's kids before I feed my own kids. You cannot expect Africa to focus on developing, you cannot expect China to focus on developing Africa when China is still grappling with its own situation. China has just recently, there are very many Chinese people who are living in abject poverty, much as it's a superpower. So President Xi Jinping, his first priority is to take care of Chinese people back home and all over the world. That's his priority. So he's not about to focus on Africans' problems when he has problems in his own backyard. Look at America. Donald Trump will tell you America first. America has its own problems. It has issues to deal with locally. So it's definitely going to look out for ways in which it deals with its own problems first. If they have a little bit left over, they'll throw some crumbs to Africa. The US economy is a $20 trillion economy, like I told you. The US has recently just put 60 billion. Now look, 60 billion compared to 20 trillion. So from a wallet or a basket that has $20 trillion, all that was taken out is just $60 billion. Those are just breadcrumbs. You understand? And the sad bit is that from that little money, Africa is going to mortgage all her resources to these foreign powers. And if we are not careful, we shall wake up when China, the US, France, Russia, they will have bought up the entire continent. We shall be loaded onto trucks and taken into the Sahara Desert, and we are dropped over there and barricaded so that we can stay there and for eternity and wallow in self-pity. Because seriously, China.
Right, because all the land were being taken, right? So we are dropping the Sahara. Look at this thing. They say Uganda's bilateral trade with Russia has doubled over the last 10 years, from 30 million in 2009 to over 74 million by the end of 2018. Much of it is in mining and ICT. Mining. So they're going to mine the land of us and then they drop us in the Sahara Desert to live there, right?
They're going to need their land to do their agriculture, so they'll just put us on buses and ship us to the Sahara Desert and just leave us there. Because we are not being serious. Look, the thing here is we cannot blame these powers, right? This is a business negotiation. Yeah. When the president of China comes to the table, he's on the table to negotiate, get the best deal for his people.
For China,
when the president of Russia sits at the table, he's looking for the best deal for the Russian people. When Donald Trump sits on the table, he's looking for the best deal for the American people. Now, if the Africans show up and they're not being serious, these people are going to take advantage. It's not their fault that the Africans are being lackluster in their negotiations. It's not their fault that the African leaders are being corrupt and they're accepting little trinkets. Of course, they'll give an African leader $1 to $3 million and they'll mortgage a seaport, they'll mortgage an airport. We recently had a scare that Mombasa was on the verge of being taken. There was also a scare that Kenneth Kaunda Airport in Zambia was on the verge of being taken. I had interactions with my colleagues in Zambia and say, well, the airport is still safe, but obviously they're highly indebted. Most of these countries, these African countries, much as we are claiming that the GDP is rising, or there's this narrative that the fastest growing economies in the world are in Africa, the likes of Rwanda, Ghana. But certainly, these economies are growing in GDP, but the standard of living of the people is going down. And we are sinking more and more in debt. So the narrative of Africa rising is more of hype than reality. We need to wake up to this fact. Yeah. And the more we console ourselves and pat ourselves on the back that apparently we are rising and we don't face the reality of the matter, we are in a big problem. We are sinking and it's a bottomless pit. We need to wake up and address the issues that are affecting us. We are sinking in debt.
Right. So
China,
in
I'm gonna give,
that way, looking at this, what role can Africans in the diaspora play, especially those of us who came here, got a little more education, got wealth, and what can we do about this?
one, we first of all need to partake more in the leadership process back in Africa. I believe the diaspora needs to engage more with the leadership back on the continent and well, criticize them and show them where we are headed, because some of these things are not being thought about in depth by people on the continent. When you get out of the picture, you get a bigger view of what exactly is going on. When you are in the picture, you only see what is around you. Because when I was in Uganda, I only saw what was within Uganda. It was after I got out of Uganda that I began seeing things from a very bigger perspective. That's when I began looking at Uganda as a small pond and Africa as something that needs to, synergize. Because the problems in Uganda are the same problems in Zambia, they're the same problems in Liberia. And unless we wake up to this realization and unite, both here in the diaspora and on the continent, we need to unite. We need to hold our leaders accountable. We need to hold our leaders accountable. Even the citizens on the continent and the diaspora, we need to, we need to partake more in holding basically the leaders accountable. For sure. That's one thing I'm looking at, because much as we shall point fingers at the external forces, that France is taking advantage of us, the pact for the continuation of colonization in West Africa, 85% of bank reserves for the former French colonies are shipped to France every single year. You know about that. And if those former colonies need any of that money, it is only given back to them in form of loans. Can you imagine? So the external people, the foreign powers, the former colonial masters have a part to play. The citizens of these African countries have to wake up and hold their leaders accountable. And the leaders themselves have to wake up and realize that if we don't get serious, we are going to end up in a very, very bad situation. We are going to end up colonized again, because this time it is an economic onslaught. They're coming at us from an economic perspective. They're dangling carrots, and we are picking up these carrots, and we are not being careful with that money either, because this money, most of it is coming in the form of loans. And the African leaders are getting this money and they're misusing it. These are not grants, these are loans. And loans attract interest. And we are supposed to pay back this money at some point in time. The current leaders will most probably not be around, because most of the African leaders are 80 years and over, so they're getting whatever they can, but they're leaving the next generation in dire straits. Our kids and our great grandkids are the ones who are going to be in a lot of trouble, paying for money that they did not actually use or receive. So we certainly need to wake up. We need to put our leaders we need to hold them more accountable, and we need to ensure that they don't really throw us in this bottomless pit.
Yeah, that's real. And I gave the analogy before at the start of this series that if African immigrants in the U.S. can come together in the early 1990s or in the late 80s, a Liberian called Charles Taylor, another one from Sierra Leone called Fode Sankoh, collaborated with another group from Libya, Burkina Faso. So these people got together and collaborated, except that what they collaborated on was to make war. So it worked very well. They were trained in Libya. They got passage through Burkina Faso and Ivory Coast, and they entered Liberia, and the rest became a 14-year devastating war. So if these wicked people can combine and wreak such havoc, good people can also come together and make a positive impact. How can we do that as immigrants? You are from Uganda, I'm from Liberia. What can we work on together to make that kind of change, but on the positive front in our continent?
I mean, the greatest problem that Africa is facing right now is on one side leadership, on the other side it's economics. So we need to figure out how we can improve the leadership on the continent. We need people who are of a different mindset, people who are not selfish, to take up the reins of power all over the continent. I think we need a younger generation of leaders, because the median age of Africa as a continent is 19. Africa is the youngest continent in the world. And certainly that needs to reflect in the area of leadership as well. You cannot expect people who are 80 years old to plan for people who are 19. People who are 80, these people are still in analog. We are in digital. So we need them to pass over the torch to the younger generation, but certainly not kick them out, because they have a lot of experience and a lot of wisdom. They can definitely advise, take on an advisory role to advise the young leaders on what mistakes they made, and to make sure that the young leaders don't make the same mistakes. But definitely we need a new breed of young leaders. We need a breed of leaders who are exposed and are widely traveled, because it's only after you travel widely that you begin seeing things from a different perspective. I'll tell you what, Black people all over the world are at the bottom of the food chain. Anywhere you go, anywhere you go. If you look at South America, the Brazilians, there are over 100 million Black people in Brazil. As a matter of fact, outside Nigeria, the next country with the most number of Blacks is Brazil. If you look at Europe, Blacks in Europe are at the bottom of the pyramid. If you look at the Middle East, the Arab world, Blacks there at the bottom of the pyramid. They're literally being treated like slaves. So we as a Black race need to realize that we need to come together and address our own problems. The problems of Africa can only be solved by Africans, both on the continent and the diaspora.
Right.
And by the diaspora, I mean those who came here and are still holding African passports, those who came here and assimilated and got naturalized and they became African Americans, and those who actually were brought here, because they're Africans who are living in the US but still hold African passports. Then there are Africans who are living in the US, have lived here long enough, or maybe married American people, and they've been naturalized, and they're now Africans who have been naturalized to become American as well. Then there are the African Americans who came as slaves, and there's that group. So all those three groups need to synergize. As a matter of fact, we need to incorporate the people in Brazil, people in South America, people in Jamaica, people in Haiti, people in Europe, people all over the world. Because at the end of the day, Africa is the motherland. Africa is where they come from. As a matter of fact, Africa is the cradle for all of humanity. But that's a conversation for another day. Let's start with African people and Black people coming together, forming a coalition to develop Africa.
Yeah. And if you're just joining us again, this is Focus on Liberia. We are discussing African collaboration, African unity. My guest is Mr. Baker Kabanda. He's originally from Uganda. And if you want to join the conversation, please post your comments to Facebook, or you can call 605-313-6004. The pin, sorry, that's the wrong number. I hope I did not post the wrong number. Yeah, it's 605-313-6004. The code is 791403. And there are some questions on Facebook. One from Dave Jassy: how will you characterize the general well-being of Ugandans in the US? Are they socio-economically well off? What are their strengths?
I'm going to generalize this. It's not just about Ugandans, Kenyans, Liberians. the bottom line is Black people in the US are a minority. And they are all at the bottom of the food chain anywhere you go. That's cross-cutting. There will be a few, 1, 2, 3, who will make it big, but on the bottom line is Black people are at the bottom of the pyramid. Let me give you something to think about. In the world today, we have 2,153 billionaires. And out of those 2,153 billionaires, we have only 11 billionaires who are Black. And out of those 11 billionaires who are Black, 7 are African, and the other 4 are African American. So that's cross-cutting, you know. The Black people are at the bottom of the pyramid. You'll have a one Oprah, you know, breakthrough. You'll have a one Aliko Dangote, a one Mike Adenuga, a Strive Masiyiwa somewhere, a Patrice Motsepe from South Africa, a Mo Ibrahim. These are just few people. A Dos Santos from Angola, Alakija from Nigeria. These are very few people. We as Black people are at the bottom of the pyramid, period. And we need to wake up. The message is we need to work together. We need to synergize. We need to look at all our challenges as general challenges, because it doesn't matter if just one country manages to break through. As long as Black people in general are below the food chain, we are all being treated the same. I mean, we experience it here in the US. When somebody sees you, a white person, once they see you, they can't tell where you're from. They can't tell that this one is Nigerian. They can't tell this one is Liberian. All they see is Black people, you know? The same way you look at Asian people. I can't tell a South Korean from a Chinese, from someone from Hong Kong, from someone from Singapore. All I see is just Asian people. So we as Black people need to realize that we are one people, and until we unite and attack our challenges as a team and harness our opportunities as a team, we are going to stay at the bottom of the pyramid. There are opportunities on Africa. There are contracts. All these contracts are being awarded to the Chinese. Where are the people from the diaspora? Where are the African Americans? We certainly know the African Americans with the skill set, with the technology, with the financial abilities to do some of these contracts. But where are they? African Americans are not visiting the continent. When African Americans are touring, they'll go to Paris, they'll go to London, they'll go everywhere, but not Africa. The issue here is that there is an invisible wall between the Africans and the African Americans. So we need to bridge that gap. We need to start that conversation between Africa and the African American, because truth be told, Africa's best chance lies in her diaspora. That's Africa's best chance. Her diaspora must unite and go back to the continent to develop the motherland. China is not going to do it for us because China has 1.4 billion people to take care of. America is not going to do it for us because America has 330 million people to take care of. You know, there's a medical situation, insurance, people don't have medical insurance. I mean, there are lots of other issues. There are weather problems. You'll hear of a Hurricane Katrina. You'll hear of this, that, and the other. You'll hear of a Flint, Michigan that has a water crisis. America has her own problems to deal with. You know, Britain has her own problems to deal with. You'll hear of a Brexit crisis. That is the number one priority for them right now. Africa is not their priority.
No.
So Africa needs to wake up. There is no help coming from anywhere else. If any help comes, we need to bake our own cake and let the other people, the visitors, just put the icing. But if we think, because originally we've always been running west to Western powers, and now all of a sudden we are excited about the East. But there's no help coming from the East. The East is coming to Africa to actually help themselves.
Yeah.
They are looking for land to resettle their people. They are looking for jobs for their people. They are looking for minerals for their companies. They're not there to save the Black people. No. And to make matters worse, these people are coming with their culture. Now you will see different African countries are teaching Chinese. They're now teaching Russian, you know, they're teaching Russian. So these people are not only coming from an economic point of view, they're entrenching themselves in it's so sad that somebody comes and visits you in your own household, and instead of them learning your language, they force you to learn their language.
Yeah.
You know, that's extremely disrespectful. And we are very quick to jump onto it. I mean, African people, we are very gullible. We don't learn from our previous mistakes. Because this is not
it's an opportunity, right? But talking about this collaboration, there has been that gap between, because we have to start from here, right here in the diaspora, even before we extend to the Caribbeans and elsewhere where there are Black people. But there is a rift or a gap between African Americans here and the African immigrants. If you go on Facebook or YouTube now, you see videos about people are saying, oh, the Africans, immigrants are calling us a kata, they are so condescending, they are saying we are lazy. And the African Americans say, oh, you are the ones who in fact sent us over here as slaves and all that. How do we bridge this gap?
We just need to start the conversation, because everybody is in their little corner with their own misconceptions, and we are not having the conversation. If we sit on the same table and the African Americans air their problems and the Africans air their problems, we can't be able to find a midpoint, because most of these things are really, because now this is the thing, every time two people are fighting, trust me, there's a third party who is benefiting from that confusion, right? So I recently saw a YouTube video, very interesting video. It was in one of the bushes in Africa, and two deer were fighting. They had actually locked horns. They were going at it nonstop. Then in the distance, a lion was sprinting towards them. Now, this lion was very, very far away, and it was sprinting. I mean, I was literally on the screen yelling at this deer, telling me, you guys, wake up, wake up. The lion is coming to eat you up. But they are so into it, fighting each other. At the end of the day, the lion came, found them fighting, and he just ripped them apart and mauled them, right? So that is the same situation we are having as African people. While we are fighting against each other, while we are keeping separate, other people are benefiting from that division. And until we wake up and realize that we have more to benefit working together than we benefit from being apart, we are going to remain at the bottom of the pyramid, and we are going to remain in misery. We are going to remain the hoodlums and the vagabonds of the world. We just need to unite. But it starts with conversation. So we need to have a conversation with the African Americans. They need to say what their problems are. The Africans need to say what their situation is. If apologies need to be made, then the two sides can apologize and then make up. I mean, it's like a marriage. A man and a woman will have differences, but that doesn't mean they each stay in different rooms. You clash, you kiss and make up, and you move on. It's in our best interest to iron out our differences. And once we iron out our differences, we shall come to realize that we have more in common than we have apart. And we benefit more working together than we shall benefit staying apart. So we have to have those conversations. They have some points that they need clarified. We also have some points that we need clarified. They say, Africans say that they're lazy. Honestly speaking, Africans, when you're coming from Africa, the perception, the media has a very big part to play in forming of perception. When you're in Africa, all you see the Black Americans doing, they're sagging their pants, they're doing drugs, and they're being arrested. You know, they impregnate their women, and they don't take care of their own. But there is a reason behind that. And until you sit down with the African Americans and they explain to you in detail how that comes about, you know, so we see them from a different angle based off of what the media has projected. And in the same vein, once you're here in the diaspora, the image that is portrayed of Africa is that of disease, corruption, war, poverty. So that is the image that is projected of Africa. So naturally, the African Americans are not eager to associate with such a negative image. And in the same vein, we as Africans are also not eager to associate with the negative image that has been portrayed of the African Americans. So we need to realize that there is a problem in between there. The media is pitting us against each other. We are brothers. We are long lost brothers, So we need to sit on the table and we figure out what is going on, African Americans don't visit Africa. The African Americans will tell you, do you have houses in Africa? Do you people wear clothes? Do you have running water in Africa? Because the image that is portrayed is people in Africa are primitive, they're still living in huts, they're just running around naked. That is the image in the 21st century. And someone will say, oh, there's the internet, why don't they research? Now, here's the thing. You cannot research about something
you already know.
No, not really. You cannot research about something that does not interest you. So if they discourage you and they tell you there's nothing good there, you don't have the interest to actually go and research and confirm. We research about things that we are interested in, things that excite us. If you tell me that Paris is amazing, they have Eiffel Tower, or it's the city of love, it's so romantic, then I'll go to the internet and research. But if you tell me Somalia, there is war, people are killing each other, they don't have water, kids are being eaten, the kids have flies all over their face, why would I waste my time on the internet researching about that country? So the media has a big part to play in creating perception. And it has done a tremendous job in creating a rift between the African Americans and the Africans. So it is the Africans in the diaspora who have to bridge this gap and tell these African Americans, hey, look here, what you see in the media is not the full story. It is part of the story, but that's only one side of the story. They need to be exposed to another side of a vibrant Africa, a thriving Africa. There's a lot of good things that are happening in Africa amidst the bad. There's a lot of infrastructure development. There's a young population. They're going to school. They're involved in technology. There's a lot of good stuff happening on the continent that needs to be put out there. And it's so sad that Africa does not have its own CNN or BBC, but we have the internet. We can leverage the power of the internet. The social media platforms are very, very big. Facebook has over 2.3 billion visitors every month. So these are platforms that we can leverage to showcase the other side of Africa.
That is true. And one of those platforms is right here, focused on Liberia. We broadcast throughout the week, and we are very fortunate to have this. Let me read a few more comments from Facebook, and we'll be drawing down the curtains very soon. When we were talking about the problem of Africa, Joanne George said, chronic corruption is Africa's Goliath. The sooner she confronts and tackles it, the better it will be for her people. There is greed and corruption the world all over, even in the US. But the need of the people must be taken care of first before stealing for you and yours. Corruption is a demon you have to keep rebuking. It may has demon do not die. It may has demon do not die. So that's a comment about corruption. There's another question for you about dual citizenship. How is the issue of dual citizenship in Uganda?
Uganda does have dual citizenship, which is a plus. And as a matter of fact, I was also having a conversation with the ambassador of Zambia to the US last weekend, and he said Zambia too has dual citizenship. So it seems a couple of African countries are becoming open to the concept of dual citizenship, which is definitely an amazing thing.
All right. So we have talked a little on that. Let's conclude with how we reach across to other Blacks across it, especially in the Caribbean, in Brazil, because you can't stress enough. We have to come together, man. Where do we start from?
Well, we need to reach out. We need to travel to these places and figure out what's going on. As a matter of fact, we are working on an initiative with Joe Beasley under the Joe Beasley Foundation. We are doing quite a bit of work in Brazil. We just set up a university in Brazil with the help of Dr. Joe Beasley and Coca-Cola. And essentially, we need to travel. We need to interact with whenever we can't travel, we have the power of the internet. We can leverage that We need to reach out to these people, find out what their problems are, what the opportunities they have are, and we need to begin the conversation. So yes, we need to travel and we need to reach out in whatever way, shape, or form. There are some organizations here of people from those places. We need to reach out to those organizations as well. However, there's still a problem, speaking to Brazil in particular, that most Black Brazilians like to think of themselves as white, especially those who are mixed. They're so ashamed of their Black heritage. So those who are mixed, they want to associate more with being white, because there's this syndrome that, you know, the white man's ice is colder. If you're closer to white, then you're privileged. So there's that, and I mean, it's happening, because you look back at Africa as well. Most of the young ladies are bleaching their skins to, you know, to become closer to white as they possibly can. It's an issue of low self-esteem, and I think it comes from the concept that, you know, the Black brand in particular has been downtrodden, and people have lost hope. They don't want to associate with the Black brand. But people need to realize that Black people are great people. Black people have done very many great things throughout history. The richest man to ever have walked the face of this earth is a West African called Mansa Musa from Mali. If were he to be around today, he would be roughly about 400 billion. And to put it in perspective, 400 billion is a combination of Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, and Mark Zuckerberg, you know. So if you look at in terms of inventions, Black people have partaken in very many inventions. If you look in terms of civilization, the Egyptians were some of the first people to, you know, create great things. Look at the pyramids, for instance. If you look at Spain, Spain was civilized by Black people. The Moors went to Spain when the Spanish people were still in the dark ages. They were, you know, they were not bathing. They were, you know, and they had excrement all over the cities. Basically, it was a sad situation. These Black people showed up. You'll see all the infrastructure. Most of the great infrastructure in Spain was built by these people. So historically, Black people are amazing people. They are great people. We've had people like Nelson Mandela, who are selfless people who have done a lot to impact the world in general. So people need to realize that Black is not a curse. Black is actually a blessing. The mere fact that you have this Black skin, this melanin, is a blessing, because it traps the sun rays from causing cancer. So it's a blessing. White people have to, you know, smear themselves with sunscreen. So these small things need to be brought out to show people that being Black is not a curse. Actually, being Black is a blessing. And when people realize that being Black is a blessing, they'll uphold their Blackness and they'll work through their challenges to be able to harness the opportunities. Africa is the richest continent on earth. Look at the DRC Congo. Almost all the minerals you can ever imagine, they're in the DRC Congo. But our greatest problem is, one, leadership. Two, throughout time, we have been brainwashed through the media. The things that we are watching on TV, these Hollywood movies, most of them portray people of Black descent as, you know, people who are up to no good. You know, we used to joke about something. Whenever you watch a horror movie, the first person to die is always a Black person.
I know.
So we used to laugh about that all the time, you know. So we need to change perception. We need to re-educate Black people about what it means to be Black. And we need to help people realize that being Black is not a curse, it's actually a blessing. And we need to reorganize ourselves. We need our leadership to wake up. We don't need to follow our leaders like blind sheep. If they're leading us in the wrong direction, we need to hold them accountable. And we need to harness the power of the youth. This is the youngest continent. Half of the population, I mean, 60% of the population is below the age of 35. That is a resource that can be used to develop the continent. That's a lot of firepower, that's a lot of energy. But if that energy is not harnessed, that can become a time bomb as well. Because having a bunch of youth, energetic, unemployed, they're going to become distressed and they could very easily become rowdy. You saw what happened under the Arab Spring. A young man from Tunisia, 26-year-old, Bouazizi, he got desperate and he just touched himself. He set himself on fire. And so we need to tap into the power of the youth. And certainly the leadership needs to involve the young leaders more. The older generation needs to bow out and let the younger generation take up the reins of leadership so we can drive the continent in a different direction. We are not going to wait for help to come from otherwise, because there's no help coming. The people we are waiting for also have their problems that they need to deal with. Africa's problems can only be solved by African people. I can't say this enough.
I know.
I can't say this enough. Africa's problems can only be solved by African people and the African diaspora. Plus, we need to involve the women. We need to involve the women more in leadership positions. Women have a maternal instinct. Women will look forward to the next generation, their kids. For us, the men, I don't know, we are short-term thinkers. We can mortgage the entire continent. But the women will think, oh, what will my kids do? Or what will my great-grandkids? So we need to involve the women more in leadership positions. So certainly that is something that we need to partake in. Rwanda is doing a phenomenal job. 60% of the Rwandan parliament is actually women. So that's a big one on Kagame's side. Speaking of unity, the president of Ethiopia, a young man, the prime minister of Ethiopia, Prime Minister Abiy, recently won a Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts to join Ethiopia and Eritrea. The two have been at it. They've been at loggerheads for a very long period of time. But when he came into power, that again speaks to the power of young, forward-thinking leaders. This gentleman is 40, I think 42 years of age. He's in his early 40s. So he came, he realized Ethiopia has been at loggerheads with Eritrea for a long time. So he brokered a deal, and now, there's peace prevailing between those two countries. So that is an example that we can actually unite and we can work together. The things that are putting us apart are not benefiting us. They are not. We are all at the bottom of the pyramid. We are all competing at the bottom. We need to wake up and realize that all of us, we are at the bottom. When we realize that we are all at the bottom and we want to go to the top, then we shall unite and try to climb the ladder.
That is very true.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Kabanda, thank you so much for the wonderful time. We hope we can have you back very quickly. And what we try to do here is to grow this pie and be able to have a platform that we can reach out, that we can use this as a medium to connect all Africans. Currently, there is an African association here in Metro Atlanta, headed by our brother from Cameroon, Chitezu, and we'll try to connect so that we can start working from there. I want to thank you so much for coming. Before I let you go, I just want to hear your final thoughts, maybe some things that we didn't cover, or what can remain. Your last word to Africans is always what we look forward to.
Last word, one, Africa needs to be very careful about all these countries that are coming in to help. All this money that is being thrown at Africa right now, we need to be very, very careful when we are partaking deals. We need to unite. Of course, the Africa free trade area is a big one. We need to be happy about that. We need to work towards a free movement of people on the continent, because it's so sad that I have to ask for a visa to fly from Uganda, say, to Nigeria. One of the reasons why the US has developed is because they figured out a way of synergizing. I don't need a visa to fly from Washington to Atlanta. I don't need a visa to fly from Atlanta to California, So there needs to be freedom of movement all across the continent. We need to stop this myopic thinking of, everybody needs to be in their little kingdom alone. That's a little kingdom, and you're going to be crushed with it. You're not going to go anywhere with that little kingdom. That is a message to the African leaders. So we need to be open-minded. We need to figure out a way how to synergize. We need to figure out a way to create employment. We need to figure out a way to add value to our raw materials. Let's not sell raw materials as is, because we don't benefit much if we sell them as raw materials. 70% of the world's cocoa comes from West Africa, Ivory Coast and Ghana. The chocolate industry is a $100 billion industry. But how much does West Africa get? Less than 10% of that. It's so sad. We need to add value to our products, and we need to pray. Last but not least, we need to pray for divine intervention, such that our cousins, the Chinese and the Americans and all these other people, realize that at the end of the day, we are all human beings under the sky, and that one group of people is not superior in comparison to other groups of people. Yeah. And that if Africa doesn't develop, those countries are going to have a big immigration problem. Right now, people are swimming across the Mediterranean to get into Italy. People are doing all sorts of things to get into these other countries. So it's in the best interest of these countries as well to try and ensure that Africa prospers. Much as Africa is making mistakes when it comes to the negotiating table, it is in the best interest of all countries to look towards the development of Africa, because we are a global village right now. The world is a global village. Anything that happens anywhere has an impact on the entire globe. If there is pollution in China, the pollution of the ozone layer doesn't stop in China. The effects are going to be felt all over the world. So we need to realize that we are all human beings under the sky, and all we need is really the same thing. We just need to be happy. We need to feed our kids. We need to house our people, and we need to live together happily as and go through this challenging journey called life.
Mr. Kabanda, before you end your thoughts, I just have one caller on the line so that we can conclude this. Caller, your name and where you're calling from?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. John. My name is Jerome Kuhn. I'm calling from Fargo, North Dakota.
Jerome, welcome to Focus on Liberia. We have almost ended the broadcast so quickly.
I know. That will be very brief. Mr. Kabanda, thank you so much for the deliberation, and I really appreciate it. My question or comment will be, African unity has been something we have heard about over the last almost, I can say, century. At this point in time, I don't know if people still envisage such unity, such collaboration among African states. But that is my question. I want to agree with one that I was going to write a comment, but I couldn't. Agree with one. I think it's a sister who said the problem is corruption. So I think if African countries that are within the continent need to learn from other smaller countries in Asia, in Europe that have, made it, like you talk about Singapore, you talk about Kuwait, you talk about Luxembourg, you talk about other smaller countries within other continents that are making it. I think that's where we are now. I don't see the possibility of any collaboration among African countries. But what I think we need to work on as individual African countries is to face the issue of corruption and be able to address the issue of our individual, peoples. I think that's what the problem really is right now. I may be wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kuhn.
I mean, it's an interesting perspective, but like I said, look at a country like Djibouti. It has 900,000 people. That's the population. The GDP is 2 billion. So even if it's scaled from 2 billion to 4 billion, even if it's scaled to 10 billion, it still doesn't have the capacity to compete with countries like China, like France. So we all need to fight corruption in the different parts of the continent. But all said and done, we need to do this together in unison as a team. We need to speak as one voice, because divided, we cannot be able to achieve much. We are going to get eaten up by the global economy. We are now a global village. and competition is definitely going to ensure that all these small, the natural law is the strong people prey on the weak people. So these African nations are small and they're weak nations. So the bigger nations are naturally going to eat up the smaller nations. That's jungle law. We are in a jungle right now. So the only chance for Africa to survive is to come together and forge some type of alliance. Only then can they be able to stave off the onslaught from these superpowers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Kabanda. We are so glad again to have you. It's been a very fruitful and rewarding discussion. I've learned so much. And if there's anything that I forgot, I will remember that all of us are at the bottom of the pyramid, and that's where we are fighting. And in order for us to be on top, we need to come together and approach this gorilla on a united front. On behalf of all of us here at Focus on Liberia, we want to say thank you so much. We want to also thank our viewers from across the globe who are watching us on Facebook, those who call in, those who comment. I want to say thank you so much.
Goodbye.
On behalf of all of us, my name is Dennis Jazz saying good night and God bless you.